Flak shredded the morning sky over Ploesti like thrown gravel, and 500 feet above the oil tanks that fed Hitler's war, a formation of American bombers clawed forward into a furnace. If you clicked for how one farmer's illegal idea created America's deadliest bomber, you're in the right cockpit. Because none of this should have been possible, not the low-level labyrinth through smokestacks and searchlights, not the sheer number of bombers that kept coming after mission bled the ranks dry, and yet they did keep coming. The question is how? Who decided that a country that built cars could build bombers the same way, on a line, by the mile, faster than the Luftwaffe could shoot them down? Here's the twist. The spark didn't come from a Pentagon strategist or an aeronautical genius. It came from a farm boy who hated farm work, who believed machines could out-stubborn nature, and whose company would break rules, bend contracts, and bulldoze the old way of doing things until bombers rolled out like Model Ts. Henry Ford's hands learned stubbornness on a Michigan farm, where broken harvesters meant lost seasons and empty larders. That childhood forged a single obsession: build machines ordinary people can use, at scale, with parts that fit every time. Decades later, the United States didn't need cars. It needed long-range bombers in terrifying quantities. Consolidated's B-24 Liberator had wings like a gull and a bomb bay that could swallow steel mills by the ton, but the airplane was a craftsman's project. Ribs and skins were coaxed together by specialists with measuring tapes in their pockets and pride in their fingertips. At that speed, the war would be lost. Ford's answer sounded reckless. Do for bombers what the moving line did for cars. Standardize everything. Put wings, engines, wiring looms, and turrets on separate lines. Then lock them together in a choreography so tight you could set your watch by a rivet gun. Illegal was the polite word the aviation establishment used when whispers started about what Ford's team did next. Charles Sorensen, Ford's iron-willed production chief, walked the San Diego plant like a thief in a museum after hours, memorizing jigs and tooling paths the way safecrackers memorize clicks. What he brought back to Michigan wasn't just notes. It was a plan to dismantle the old guild of airplane building and reassemble it inside a single cathedral of speed carved out of bean fields west of Detroit. Willow Run, a mile of assembly line under one roof. Airflow calculated, fixtures indexed, sub-assemblies rolling on dollies like cattle through chutes. The Air Corps bureaucracy balked, Consolidated bristled, and Union men muttered that you cannot make a precision airplane like a kitchen toaster. Sorensen ordered concrete anyway. That was the crime: moving first, asking never, and betting that when the first liberators taxied out in rows, everyone would forgive the broken china. Potential tweak ideas within this chunk. Punch the Ploesti opener with one vivid, surprising sensory detail from the ground perspective. Consider a single line of quoted resistance to heighten the illegal tension. Tighten the Sorensen Nightwalk into a 10-word sentence for rhythmic contrast. The first morning, the siren wailed through Willow Run. The place smelled like cut pine and hot tar. There were no saints on those catwalks, just people who used to bolt fenders at Dearborn, now drilling holes in bomb bays under slogans painted so big they doubled as navigation. Do it right or do it twice. To make a bomber on a moving line, you have to uncurl chaos. Ford's engineers did it with jigs that located holes within a hair's breadth, plug-and-play wiring looms that snapped into junction boxes, and carts that slid Pratt & Whitney engines under nacelles like dresser drawers. They built the factory to build the airplane, then rebuilt the airplane to fit the factory. Every redesign shaved minutes, and minutes compounded into sorties. The old guard said it would never fly. By the time they finished the sentence, an unfinished B-24 had already inched forward 3 stations. None of this was pretty. Early Willow Run liberators rattled and leaked. Cold Michigan winters froze dope in the fabric, and spring thaws turned the parking aprons into lakes. Inspectors rejected airframes by the dozen. Sorensen responded the only way he knew: rework the line while it was moving, resequence the wing line, replace human eyeballs with go-no-go gauges, put the turret boys on a separate path so their delays never starved the fuselage. He even split final assembly into mirrored lines, a production feint that looked like a magician's trick. While one line hiccuped, the other devoured parts. By the time crews mastered the dance, a new cadence owned the building. 1 liberator every hour, then 56 a day, 60. The numbers were less a statistic than a drumbeat, carrying all the way to North Africa, to Italy, to the North Atlantic, where grey water hid grey wolves with periscopes. In the air, quantity becomes a weapon that feels like weather. You do not defeat it, you endure it. The B-24 was never beloved like the Flying Fortress, but it did a colder arithmetic. It flew farther, carried more, climbed like a grudging mule, and swarmed the kill zones in herds so large that flak gunners lost count, and fighter aces ran out of ammunition before they ran out of targets. Oil burned at Ploesti. U-boats died in the Biscay. Rail yards unraveled in strings of orange. Ask the men who flew them. They will tell you the Liberator was a hot, stiff, sometimes treacherous machine. Ask the men who opposed them. They will tell you it was everywhere. Potential tweak ideas within this chunk. Add one quick, human-scale moment on the line to ground the speed stats. Consider a crisp micro-comparison to the B-17 in a single sentence to seed future conflict. Add a sensory verb in the weather line to heighten immersion. They hired farmers' daughters who could thread needles in a moving wagon and taught them to lace cable harnesses blindfolded. They hired men too old for the draft and teenagers too young for it, and paired them at benches where aluminum skins lay like quilts on horses. In the morning, school buses disgorged workers at Gate 10. At midnight, another army went home under vapor lamps. Willow Run became a city that slept in shifts, with lunch pails stacked beside drill presses and baby photos taped above talk charts. The illegal part evolved from attitude to method. When a supplier missed deadlines, Ford set up an in-house line to stamp the part. When a dimension on Consolidated's drawing didn't play nice with a jig, the jig won. Contracts said one thing, the moving line demanded another. So the team quietly revised tolerances, redrew fittings, built universal fixtures that turned bespoke sub-assemblies into interchangeable groceries. The joke on the floor was that Willow Run wasn't just building B-24s, it was re-engineering the B-24 until it behaved in public. The Air Corps inspected with clipboards and suspicion. Where were the craftsmen? Where were the hand-fit ribs, the old magic? Sorensen led them onto the mezzanine. Below, a wing slid past a rain of rivets. A fuselage swallowed wiring like a python. A nose section accepted a turret with a clank and a shake, as if resettling its shoulders. "There's your magic," he said. The colonels frowned at the audacity, at the way the car men had domesticated an airplane. Then someone did the math. Even at 80% first-time quality, 60 airplanes a day outstripped perfection by a factor of war. Out on the ramp, pilots learned a new ritual. They did not bless a unique machine, they checked a part number. If a fuel pump failed at Tunis, its twin on line 4, station K, date code 7 would fit. Reliability by repetition. That was the heresy. That was the salvation. Potential tweak ideas within this chunk. Add one punchy, one-sentence anecdote from a line worker to humanize the scale. Sharpen the illegal redrawing moment with a single concrete example of a tolerance change for texture. Consider one crisp number, e.g. total workforce size on a peak day, to anchor the city in a factory image. In the theaters where the Liberator earned its name, the farm boys' rule-breaking echoed with each engine start. Over the North Atlantic, B-24s flew with radar noses and belly tanks, stretching patrol lines until wolf packs starved for targets. A U-boat commander once said the ocean grew eyes the year the four-engine shadows arrived. Convoys that used to be lonely now had caped shepherds overhead. In Burma's green furnace, long legs carried supplies where roads drowned. In Italy, rails that fed the Gothic line buckled under strings of bombs, spaced by Norden crosshairs and crew chiefs' steady hands. And then there was Ploesti, the mission that became a parable. Low-level liberators threaded smokestacks and power lines, Flak stalking them like a living thing. The cost was obscene, the effect was strategic. Fuel is war's bloodstream, and the hemorrhage never fully stopped. Back home, the line learned to outrun grief. When word came that a squadron's losses had been heavy, a supervisor walked the stations, not to mourn, but to accelerate. Swap the order of the turret feed. Pre-assemble oxygen manifolds. Move inspection 2 doors upstream. Every tweak saved seconds, every second multiplied into airplanes, every airplane into sorties, each sortie into fewer telegrams that began, "We regret to inform." The B-24 kept changing under the skin. Block numbers, dash numbers, field mods for dust, for cold, for flak. Willow Run changed with it without ever halting the drumbeat. There were nights the snow rode the wind straight through the doors and rivet lines froze. Mornings the sun flashed off 1,000 square feet of aluminum and made the hangars look like glaciers. Through it all, the line crept forward like a metronome. Potential tweak ideas within this chunk. Insert a single, visceral cockpit micro-scene during Ploesti, smell of fuel, map smearing with sweat, to spike emotion. Consider one contrasting sentence praising the B-17 to acknowledge audience bias before showing why the B-24 mattered. Add a short, memorable phrase for reliability by repetition to become a motif. By spring 1943, Willow Run's hum had become a national sound, a rhythm of rivet guns and conveyor belts that could be heard in the headlines. Reporters called it the Grand Canyon of production. Ford's publicists called it the arsenal of democracy's beating heart, but inside, the workers just called it the line. Shift whistles split the night, floodlights washed the hangars pale, and every 90 minutes another silver bomber rolled toward the open doors, its aluminum skin shining like the belly of a fish. The moment it touched daylight, ground crews swarmed, installing propellers, filling tanks, and stamping delivery tags that read simply, "Property of the United States Army Air Forces." The system that Henry Ford had been warned was impossible was now routine. It was heresy that worked. There were secrets inside that efficiency. Ford engineers had designed custom machines that drilled hundreds of rivet holes in one motion. They built adjustable jigs that could realign themselves as new modifications came from the front. The work never stopped. Even when a design change came down at midnight, new turret fit, oxygen bottle relocation. The blueprint room had it on the line by dawn. Mechanics who'd never seen an airplane before 1942 were now rebalancing control surfaces to fractions of a degree. Rosie the Riveter wasn't a slogan at Willow Run. She was a line lead, a grandmother, a farm girl, a welder's wife. They worked through blackouts, through ration shortages, through epidemics of exhaustion. Ford's managers kept them fed with coffee, and songs from the radio piped through the loudspeakers. "We're building wings," one foreman said. "Not cars, not numbers, wings for the boys." The Army didn't trust Ford at first to deliver combat-ready aircraft. Every B-24 produced at Willow Run was flown first to a modification center, Tulsa, Dallas, Fort Worth, where consolidated engineers added the finishing touches. But soon, the modifications shrank to paperwork. The Ford bombers were coming off the line tighter, cleaner, faster. The serials blurred into sequence. Colonel Roy "Wally" Stanley, head of acceptance at Tulsa, wrote in a memo, "The Ford-built aircraft are so uniform that parts from Ship 14 fit Ship 87 without rework. This is unprecedented." The phrase spread through the air forces as a kind of awe. Uniformity meant predictability. Predictability meant logistics that could keep up with death. And death, by then, had a schedule. Potential tweak ideas within this chunk. Consider inserting one crisp figure, e.g. total bombers per month at peak output, to quantify miracle. Add one small, specific sensory note, the smell of hydraulic fluid or hot rivets, early for texture. Possibly shorten Rosie the Riveter paragraph with one punchier contrast between war slogans and factory reality. Over Europe, the Liberator's reputation was earned in black smoke and broken formations. Crews called her the boxcar with wings, but they trusted her. She could lose a tail fin and still limp home. She could take flak through the wing and stay in the air. Pilots swore she had moods, a sweet climb at dawn, a stubborn roll in crosswinds, but they knew her heart. 4 engines, 1,000-mile reach, a payload that could peel rail yards apart. Germany learned the shape of that reach when the 8th Air Force switched to saturation raids. 60 bombers from one line in Michigan became hundreds in formation above Bremen, Hamburg, Cologne. Cities vanished under clouds of smoke, and every bomber overhead was a small victory for the farmers, the teenagers, and the engineers who ignored rules to build them faster than the Reich could rebuild. Not every story had a ribbon. Test pilots died, pushing new configurations through the sky. Assembly crews wept when telegrams came from sons lost over the Atlantic. The line never stopped. Stopping meant betrayal. Even Henry Ford, who had fought the war's inevitability with stubborn isolationism, found himself staring at the production numbers and realizing what his defiance had built. He'd argued that machines should serve peace. Now his machines were killing to end a larger evil. Reporters asked if he saw irony in that. He said only, "It's not the tools that choose the work." By 1944, Willow Run was producing a Liberator every hour. Over 8,000 workers lived in hastily built housing projects that sprawled across Ypsilanti's fields. There were schools, diners, even dance halls funded by payroll deductions. At night, the glow from the assembly hangars painted the low clouds silver. Trains lined up outside the gates to carry fresh bombers to the front. From the air, the complex looked like a crucifix, the main assembly line forming the spine, the hangars, the arms. Pilots ferrying new planes east joked that it was appropriate. They were carrying the tools of judgment. Potential tweak ideas within this chunk. Heighten the irony in Ford's personal transformation with one short interior reflection. Or quote, add a quick visual beat from a bomber pilot's ferry flight, leaving Willow Run to tie factory and front line. Consider a single concrete output figure, e.g., 8,685 B-24s from Willow Run, to anchor scale. By midsummer 1944, the bomber line at Willow Run moved with the confidence of a living organism. Sub-assemblies flowed on conveyors that hissed like serpents. Wings met fuselages in a synchronized ballet of cranes and clamps, and each hour The hangar doors opened to release another silver Liberator into the humid Michigan sky. It was no longer just engineering, it was momentum incarnate. Reporters who visited the factory described it as a river of metal that never dries. To the workers, it was simply the mission. They didn't see themselves as machinists or welders anymore. They were participants in an unbroken relay, passing on rivets, panels, and faith that somewhere across the ocean a crew would live because they hadn't slowed down. Every task had a rhythm measured not in seconds but in beats. 3 hits of the rivet gun, 1 pull of the clamp, the pop of a pressure gauge. Supervisors timed cycles with stopwatches and clipped notes to boards. Fix this weld angle, widen this jig. The illegal genius of Ford's system wasn't secrecy, it was refusal to ask permission. When blueprints lagged behind reality, Sorensen's men drafted their own revisions and sent them straight to production. The Army's inspectors called it unauthorized engineering. The workers called it common sense. If a fix saved time or lives, it stayed. The rest got tossed in a bin with coffee grounds and metal shavings. Bureaucrats could protest all they liked. The line did what war demanded. Even the small details told the story of defiance. Each bomber left the factory with a handwritten note from the floor crew taped to the instrument panel. "Come home safe, we built you solid." Pilots read those words before taking off for shakedown flights. Some kept the notes, folding them into logbooks that survived missions over France and Poland. In that quiet exchange, grease-stained handwriting to cockpit glass, the distance between farm fields and front lines collapsed. Willow Run wasn't a place anymore. It was an idea that traveled at 200 miles per hour and dropped steel promises on the Reich. Potential tweak ideas within this chunk. Weave in one specific worker's name or quote to humanize the anonymous rhythm. Consider a single sensory image from the test flight line. Fuel fumes, prop wash, or snow melt for texture. Tighten the 3 hits of the rivet gun sentence slightly to quicken pacing. The air war reached its crescendo in late 1944, and the Liberator became its metronome. Over Germany, bomber streams stretched from horizon to horizon. Crews navigated through contrails so thick they turned daylight milky. On the ground, civilians said the sky sounded mechanical, a low, endless drone that meant another factory, another railway, another supply depot erased. The B-24 wasn't beautiful. It was brutal efficiency rendered in aluminum. Its Davis wing gave it range that outflew the escorts. Its payload crushed targets that survived the fortress. It leaked fuel, rattled panels, and demanded strength from its pilots, but it did the one thing every bomber had to do: arrive. In Italy, liberators from the 15th Air Force struck oil fields, rail bridges, and ports in the Balkans, carving arteries through the Axis logistics. In the Pacific, B-24s replaced aging B-17, covering vast ocean gaps from island to island. They carried bombs, torpedoes, food, and sometimes leaflets. Pilots joked that the only thing a Liberator couldn't carry was mercy, and back in Michigan, the line answered every loss with production. When news came of 50 aircraft missing, Sorensen ordered the next 50 accelerated. No speeches, no mourning, just the relentless conversion of metal into hope. Henry Ford visited one afternoon, standing silent beside the final assembly gate as 6 completed bombers rolled toward transport trains. He was 79, stooped, half-deaf, but even he understood that the farm boy's obsession had outgrown him. The illegal idea, the notion that precision and volume could coexist, had rewritten the laws of war. Potential tweak ideas within this chunk. Add a brief, striking aerial vignette, bombers at sunrise or flak bursts mirrored in the cockpit glass. to heighten emotional texture, emphasize the line's tempo with one short staccato sentence like, "Never stop, never ask, just build." When the war finally began to tilt toward victory in early 1945, the sound of Willow Run didn't soften. It quickened. The Luftwaffe was dying, but not yet dead, and every day's delay meant more crews lost over gray skies and black smoke. In the winter cold, frost slicked the runways, and workers wore layers of flannel under oil-stained coveralls. The heaters failed, so they burned scrap wood in barrels between shifts. Still, the line didn't stop. The joke on the floor was that the Germans could bomb Detroit, and the rivet guns would keep tempo through the dust. That winter, the factory hit its impossible rhythm. One completed bomber every 55 minutes. No ceremony, no pause. Just a rolling sequence of engines and ambition. At peak output, over 8,600 B-24 Liberators emerged from that single mile-long line, enough to stock entire air fleets. The same newspapers that once called Ford's plan reckless now called it divine. Pilots who ferried new aircraft eastward said taking off from Willow Run was like lifting from the future. You'd taxi past rows of identical bombers, all gleaming under the lights, engines coughing into life one by one until the air trembled. Then the runway stretched out beneath you, long enough to launch a dream, and when the wheels left Michigan soil, the world below blurred into the geometry of a machine civilization had willed into existence. At 20,000 feet, the sound of 4 engines blended into a single chord. That was the sound of mass production turned into survival. The bomber climbed steady and sure, every gauge reading true, every rivet in place. That was the miracle, the sameness of perfection. Henry Ford watched from a control tower as one flight lifted off, hands clasped behind his back, coat tugging in the prop wash. He wasn't sentimental by nature, but even he felt something heavy and unspoken as the planes vanished into low clouds. Around him, the floor managers, many of them farm boys like he once was, stared upward and didn't cheer. They just nodded. They knew those planes would not all return. Yet they built more and faster because the war didn't care about endings, only output. Somewhere deep in his mind, Ford must have recognized the circle closing. The boy who hated broken harvesters had built machines that reaped at a scale the world had never seen. After Germany fell, the sky above Europe belonged to the bomber streams that Willow Run had fed for 2 relentless years. Every remaining factory, bridge and fuel depot worth hitting had already burned under the rhythm of industrial thunder. Crews, flying the last missions in April 1945, described the landscape below as ash and geometry, rail lines twisted, airfields cratered, rivers choked with wreckage. In those last weeks, the B-24s weren't symbols of destruction. They were proof that organization and will could overpower tyranny's chaos. One flight engineer wrote home to his wife in Michigan, "When I see another Liberator up here, I think of home. I think of the line. I think of the hands that built her. That letter made it back to Ypsilanti and was pinned to the bulletin board above the punch clock. Workers read it in silence before starting another shift, even though the war's end was already announced. The end brought contradictions. The same precision that had conquered war now stood idle. Willow Run's endless motion slowed to an echo. Conveyors stopped mid-cycle with tools still hanging from their hooks. The last B-24 rolled out on June 28, 1945, its aluminum skin polished to a mirror finish. The workers who had spent years bending steel and time lined the walls as it passed. Some wept quietly, others just watched. For the first time, the siren that marked the shift change did not blow. The plant that had defined speed suddenly became a cathedral of stillness. Henry Ford's dream, the illegal experiment in industrial audacity, had achieved its purpose and exhausted it in the same moment. Yet Willow Run's legacy didn't end with silence. Its architecture, the mile-long assembly line, the interchangeable jigs, the modular design philosophy, became the DNA of post-war manufacturing. Automakers copied it, aircraft companies refined it, and the government built entire economies on its logic. The idea that precision could scale, that quality and quantity could coexist, became not just a wartime miracle, but a peacetime standard. Every modern production facility, from Boeing's hangars to SpaceX's clean rooms, owes something to the lesson forged in that frozen Michigan field. Innovation sometimes breaks the law before it rewrites it. The human stories outlived the machines. The women who riveted skins went home and became teachers, engineers, and mothers. The farm boys who learned to read micrometers instead of soil turned into the backbone of America's post-war industry. Sorensen retired quietly, but his methods filled textbooks, and Henry Ford, stubborn to the end, would live to see the machines that replaced his own assembly lines carry men into the sky for peace, not war. He never called Willow Run a factory again. He called it proof. If you stand on that site today, the hangar roofs are mostly gone, the concrete cracked by weeds. But if you listen close on a windy afternoon, you can almost hear the ghosts of the line, the clatter of rivet guns, the shuffle of boots, the murmur of 1,000 voices bound to a single purpose. History often remembers battles and heroes, but not the hands that built their wings. This story belongs to those hands, the farmers, the daughters, the machinists, the engineers who turned rebellion into rhythm and changed the outcome of a world war. They took an idea no one authorized and made it undeniable. The Ploesti oil fires have long gone dark, and the liberators that once blackened the skies rest in museums or scrapyards. But their spirit endures in every factory that dares to dream beyond permission. When a mechanic tweaks a process without waiting for paperwork, when a designer risks an untested configuration because it feels right, that's Willow Run whispering through time. It's the proof that sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't invention, it's audacity. If this story moved you, take a moment now to keep it alive. Subscribe to the channel, share this film, and help us tell more of the forgotten stories that shaped our world, the farmers who became builders, the mechanics who broke rules, the dreamers who turned metal and faith into flight. Your support keeps history breathing, one story at a time. And remember, innovation begins when someone refuses to wait for permission.